Hi, thank you for joining me. Today, I would like to talk about how generational trauma can be passed down to younger generations, the studies done, and using that information to broaden our perspective, helping us to face things that would normally trigger us, and instead standing strong in healthier beliefs about ourselves. If you like my content, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. There are articles in the pinned comment that give more information on how generational trauma can be passed down. These situations are not a one-size-fits-all. Take the parts that can help you and leave to the side the parts that don't make sense for you. Holocaust survivors are one of the most studied groups of people, showing how generational trauma can be passed down. They found that children and grandchildren of Holocaust survivors had an excessive need for psychiatric care. These extended families were more likely to experience addiction, depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Some other studies show that generational trauma can be passed down through learned behavior. If the parent didn't receive love, acceptance, shown empathy, if they were neglected as a child, or their parents had narcissistic tendencies, then they have a high probability of repeating this cycle for their own children. When parents are unable to form healthy connections to their children, then it's probably likely they also had adverse childhood experiences from their caregivers, who faced similar emotional, neglectful abuse and lack of love when they were children. And this can all play a part in generational trauma. When growing up being shown behavior like anger, slamming doors, shaming, manipulation, comparison, projection, guilt tripping, this can become normalized. We can become desensitized to this behavior as it becomes our normal way of life. Parents or grandparents who never explored or healed their own emotional trauma may tend to have a difficult time providing the necessary emotional support and have a healthy connected relationship to the next generation. On top of this, if the older generations deny and minimize that this behavior happened, then they are putting up roadblocks to healing this trauma, also making it easier to pass on for future generations. It may be helpful to look back through your generations to see the way your parents were raised by their parents and, if you can, to look at your grandparents, exploring what family life was like for them. By seeing this trauma for what it is and being mindful around it, it may help us to prevent the cycle from continuing. We may have a high tendency to take these traits with us into adulthood. We may have asked ourselves the question, am I a narcissist? I think that every person on the planet can and has had narcissistic tendencies. The difference is being able to look at ourselves and have a mindfulness around these tendencies, heal and make changes so that we can be better for ourselves and future generations. For me, some narcissistic traits that I carried into adulthood was when I was in relationships. I would expect the other person to act a certain way to make me feel good about myself. And if they didn't act that way, I would become angry. And I'd try to control the situation by projecting shame. My behavior came from my own shame, guilt, and my damaged self-esteem. Among other things I had was low tolerance for feelings from others that weren't anything other than happy. For me, I wasn't able to develop healthy relationships until I started healing these parts of myself, and I started finding genuine self-love and self-care. Having a deep understanding and awareness around this might help us to see why our family is the way it is and help us to find a healthy detachment from the feelings and beliefs we carry about ourselves, about not being good enough, worthy enough, valuable, and also what parts of the trauma cycle are we continuing on within us that we no longer want for ourselves. It can help to know that the poor relationships we had with our parents when we were kids was not our fault and was never really about us, but about them. They were living out their own childhood trauma in their adult life. It was like looking into a mirror of their own upbringing, where they came from and what they went through. just like we could possibly be doing the same ourselves now, which is something I've done. This is not meant to justify their behavior, make them victims, or to minimize our own trauma, but as an avenue to help us move through and release these hard relationships, overcoming this painful legacy and creating our own space to feel safe, valued, and loved, being sensitive and responsive to ourselves, to then be able to pass on these healthier traits to our loved ones. To understand someone's pain, which is what you see play out in their behavior, you have to look at their lives, and then to see how they develop their coping mechanisms and what their coping mechanisms look like. It can also be what's needed for us to do for ourselves, to understand our own pain and our own coping mechanisms. Knowledge and wisdom is powerful, and it can help support us in our healing journey. Seeing the bigger picture from a higher viewpoint, from the outside looking in, to help us not feel so attached to their behavior that hurt us, to move out from underneath the belief that we weren't good enough for our parents. Using this knowledge along with our healing practices to be able to look at our parents objectively, maybe being able to detach from this repeated story and gain forgiveness for them and for ourselves. We are not responsible for our parents' feelings, and putting up very healthy, strong boundaries can prevent further distress. We can make changes to improve our belief system that we have about ourselves so that we can move forward in our lives in a more positive way. I've attached another article in the pinned comment that talks about healthy detachment for boundaries and healing that I find very helpful. It talks about letting go of ways of being and thinking that no longer serve us. Our parents are a consequence of their upbringing, and so are we. The beautiful thing is we get to choose how to decide how to move forward from here and make the necessary changes in our lives so that we can be happier and more at peace. Every day is a new day to add healing and make a different choice around these situations. Children are victims in these households, but as adults, we no longer have to be victims. It's time for us to take a stand and become warriors for ourselves and for our future generations by putting an end to the unhealthy cycle and healing our wounds. We can become people who love ourselves, and unconditional love can radiate out from us. Usually, people who come from happy, healthy homes have learned how to communicate and have a joy around forming a bond with their children or loved ones, and we can create this for ourselves. Also, we can forgive, have grace, by giving somebody something you don't feel that they deserve. It's not for you. It's for our future and ourselves. If you're carrying around resentment, hate, and pain, then that negative ball of energy is always with you and can be playing out in your everyday life. Healing, self-love, forgiveness, and letting go of that resentment isn't something that happens overnight. It's something that can be worked on little by little, and all those little bits add up over time. We have the ability to say no more. This ends with me, and become our own soldier for ourselves, loved ones, and future generations. I hope this helps. I love you all.